Hi, this is Dr. John Westfall, and I'm here today to give you kind of a brief overview of APA style and the sorts of things that you need to consider when writing either a research report or a term paper in APA style. This is one of the subjects that students invariably have difficulty with. This is something that you will not probably master after watching this video or reading the entire APA manual or doing all the activities that I recommend. You'll still take some practice before a lot of these things become second nature, and for someone like myself who's been working with it for over 10 years now, I still have a lot of times where I'm scratching my head, metaphorically and literally, wondering what exactly I should do given a certain situation in APA style. So I want to get a few things started first. There's some resources that I'm going to be mentioning throughout this talk. All of them can be found at my website at johnwestall.com/UGH-APA. That'll take you to a copy of these slides. It'll take you to the resources I mentioned. It'll probably even take you to this video once the video is uploaded. And a lot of these resources come from around the web. So there are some resources that I'm using through the Society for the Teaching of Psychology by Drs. Kosha Bramesfield, Jordan Fuss, and Dr. Richard Froman. Some very good stuff. Jordan Fuss was a student in Richard Froman's class, and that's where the example APA manuscript that is in the pack of resources you can download came from. Kosha Bramesfield put together a very nice plagiarism or anti-plagiarism tutorial. It's not a tutorial that tells you how to plagiarize, it's one that tells you how to avoid that. And like I put here, the slideshow is not a replacement for buying the APA style manual. Yes, I know you think you can get all of the same information online. Yes, there are some great resources online, a lot of them that I talk about, but you do need to get yourself a copy of the APA manual. It only costs around $26 on Amazon. It's not a huge purchase. You can get the copy like I have that's a spiral bound, so it lays flat on your desk. You can use it when you're writing your papers, but you do need to get one of those. So as I put there, $28. Get the APA manual. It's that blue one right there. And you may want a copy of the student workbook. It's a bit bigger. It's in the orange cover. And it provides a lot of practice exercises and quizzes. In fact, I use a lot of those with my classes when we cover APA style. So it's something that you may find useful, if anything, just to check your understanding as you go through. So why do you have to learn APA style? What is so great about it? Why is it that maybe, if you're like a lot of students, you were taught MLA style in high school, you might find that a little bit frustrating that you have to learn new styles. So why APA style? Well, APA style is a common language of a lot of different disciplines. It's one of the more common citation standards in science. And honestly, you need to be able to write in it because, A, you want other people to be able to understand what you're saying and find things in your writing, and B, you want to be able to understand what other people are writing, and if you know APA style, then you know the roadmap that lets you find information inside of those manuscripts that you're looking at. It really is akin to the idea of not so much writing as a journey through all these twists and turns and things like that you may be used to in literary writing. APA style writing is a format that focuses on common understanding, common conventions, concise writing. It really is sort of the analogous to, instead of reading a nice novel that twists and turns you around in different ways, it's looking at a roadmap or a dictionary and saying, I need to find exactly this information, here's where it is. APA style does focus, as I mentioned, on clarity and concisiveness. There should be concisiveness, not conciseness, as the slides say, but there's always time to edit. That's the great thing about APA style and about writing in general. You want to keep things short and sweet. You don't want to draw things out, and I'll show some examples of how things get drawn out in a few minutes. You want to be able to present something in a very clear way that your reader will not have any problem understanding. This is not the time to get ornate in your speech. This is also not the time to fall into the trap that I think a lot of high school students fall into. You were used to high school where they told you need to make a certain page limit. What did you do to make the page limit? You found new, interesting, and longer ways to say the same thing. Every high school student does that. You weren't the only one doing it. We all try to find a way to stretch 5 pages into a 10-page paper. In APA style, if anything, I'm telling you that it will focus on condensing down those 10 pages into 5 pages. So everything you learned about, I could say this and it'll be a little longer and it'll sound fancier, throw that out. You want to say things in a very clear and concise manner. You want to also follow common mechanics. APA style has a variety of rules that say things like, if I'm writing the word subordinate, is that sub-ordinate or is that one word? I'll give you a hint. In this case, it's one word, subordinate. But there are many more little mechanic questions about when do I use periods, when do I use commas, when do I use semicolons. If you're a good writer, if you've been writing for a long time, a lot of these are kind of second nature, but there still are some peculiarities here and there in APA style. You need to also, in APA style, focus on proper citation and crediting of sources. That's part of the fundamental nature of APA style because it is such a style tied to science and tied to reporting of information. You need to be able to be very clear about where you got information. If it's your information, if you came up with it, that's great. That's what we assume. If you didn't come up with it, you need to cite it in some way. If people are reading your paper and they don't see a citation, they will always assume you were the originator of that thought or that data. And if you're not, that can get you in trouble. And finally, APA style focuses on common formats for visual aids. So whatever I'm going to show you, and I'll show you some examples of tables and figures in APA style, they need to be a common sort of style. They are not just whatever Microsoft Word spits out or Excel spits out. They need to follow a standard. APA manuscripts, first and foremost, all follow a structure that doesn't change very much either through term paper or research report. There are some sections here that will only show up if you're doing a research report. Other things will be there regardless. So the first thing is the title page, including the author's name and affiliation. An author note can go on that page as well. And that is the only thing on that page, is the information about the name, the affiliation, and any author note. So you don't start writing on the very first page. It's a mostly blank page. I would recommend, if you are watching this video and you have the time, you pause it right now and go download the example manuscript that I'll be talking about a little bit, and you can kind of follow along and see how these pages look. Then you have another page that's an abstract. The abstract in APA style is about 150 words, a little bit more, a little bit less, and it really is the entire paper in 150 words. It's not designed to be a teaser to the rest of the paper. It's not supposed to lure your readers in with promises of wonderful information that you're going to give them later. No, it is all the information in the paper in just 150 words. Every professor will tell you that you should read the entire manuscript. You should always read the entire article, especially if you're citing that article. But we live in a world where people want to get information quickly, and a lot of times, the way you do that is you read the abstract. And if the abstract sounds interesting, then you read the whole article. You don't start by reading the whole article and then go, oh, wow, there's this abstract thing. Maybe I should read that. That's why it's the second thing. But paradoxically, it's easiest to write if you wait until the very end. So when you're writing a paper, don't start with writing the abstract. You don't know how the paper's going to end yet. So save writing it till the end, but it goes right after the title page. Next, we have an introduction section. This is where your literature review typically lives. There are some subfields that will ask you to put your literature review in its own section, but in strict APA style, the literature review lives in the introduction. The introduction also doesn't start with the word introduction. It's one of the most common problems I see in student manuscripts is students turn in the introduction and it says introduction right across the top. It should actually have the name of the paper across the top. So if you were to strip off the title page and the abstract and just throw someone the manuscript starting with the introduction, they wouldn't wonder what the name of it was. So ironically, the introduction section doesn't have the word introduction anywhere in it. Next, if it's a research report, you have a method section, which describes what you have done. That's typically broken down into 2 sections, a participants and a procedures section. That can differ a little bit, though, depending on what you're doing. And if you're not actually reporting any original research, you might not even have a method section. Similarly, you'll have a results section that reports just the results of any statistical tests that you've done. This isn't where you actually explain what they mean. This is where you simply say, this group differed from that group. This group had this in their descriptive data, and then we ran this statistical test. You save the interpretation for the final section, which is the discussion section. So in method, you say what you did, results, you say what you found, and in discussion, you say what it all means. Then we have references, which are their own section. They start on a new page. The introduction, the method, the results, and the discussion do not have any page breaks in them. They are just one section right after the other, although they do have subheadings, and we'll look at heading style in a moment. Then we have a new section, references. Then we have any footnotes. So footnotes in APA style do not go at the bottom of the manuscript page. They all get culled together at the very end of the manuscript. Then we have any appendices, supplemental materials. It's becoming more and more common when writing in APA style to have supplemental materials that you'll push the reader off to. And then any tables and figures. That's the manuscript structure. Now, returning to some of those core tenets of APA style, like I said, clear and concise. The idea that less is more is never more true than in scientific writing. Journals will require different lengths. They'll say that they have different forms. So some journals have what's called a short form article that should be less than a certain number of words. Other journals have an upper cap. But in general, you want to say things as clearly and concisely as possible. Headings are also to be used for consistency, and those are the heading formats taken from the APA manual. So the first level of heading, this is where you put the title of the paper above the introduction section, the word method, the word results, the word discussion. All of those are centered, boldface, uppercase, and lowercase headings, so you don't put it all in all caps or all lowercase. Then if you have a second level, it's flush left, bold, upper and lowercase heading. Third level, indented, bold. Fourth level, indented, bold, and italicized. And then fifth level, indented, italicized, and lowercase paragraph heading, ending with a period. So you see that changes a little bit. In practice, you really don't see fourth and fifth level headings that often. They just don't tend to come up too often. But if you do use them, you want to make sure that you're using the right formatting. Writing style. So we all have different ways of saying things, and that's one of the best things about our language is that we can come up with very ornate ways of saying things. Unfortunately, when we're writing, we don't want to have that same ornate and cute manner of speaking. We want to just get straight to the point. There are some ways that we do that in APA style. The first is using proper punctuation and transitional words, so I can see how one sentence connects to the other. That's one of the worst problems that I see in student writing, is that the sentences all look like I just took a bunch of sentences and threw them on a page, and I don't see how one connects to another. And that's not done necessarily using a transitional sentence, although it can be. It could just be a transitional word. Yet, although, because, however, those sorts of words can help link these things together so that my thoughts aren't just jumbled. You do want very smooth writing. You want easy to read writing. In fact, there are pieces of software online that you can take, and you can put your writing in, and it will tell you what grade level your writing is at. And while it's great if you put it in there and it says that you're, it's level 16, which is basically college senior, you really don't want to be writing for college senior. You want to be writing more, even in scientific writing, you want something that is accessible to high school senior or even high school sophomore. Keep it easy to understand. Just because it's easy to understand doesn't mean it's not important or scientific. We have this weird sort of confusion sometimes where we think if it's scientific, it has to be really dry, it has to be really official sounding, it has to be hard to read. That's what makes it science. And that's completely wrong. Now, yes, some scientists lack the ability to write very well. Some of them are not as entertaining of writers as we might wish they were as readers. But that doesn't mean that your writing should be stuffy and hard to parse. And finally, being concise means removing things like the italicized text. This is also a snippet from the APA manual. So they were both alike. That could just be they were alike. A total of 68 participants could just be 68 participants. Completely unanimous. Unanimous means completely. So take out completely. Just exactly. Just and exactly are synonymous there. So you pull those things out. You also want to attempt to reduce bias whenever possible. And the APA manual talks quite a bit about that, talking about showing respect for different groups by not using one-sided language. And I'll let you kind of explore that on your own. You could talk a lot about that on its own. But the APA manual does have a whole section on it that you can read through. You always want to use active versus passive voice. This is a real big problem for people who are coming into APA style. It's one of those things that you really want to make sure that you work on addressing in your writing. In fact, I always, before I submit anything, I have a piece of software on my computer. I use a Mac, and the software's name is Hemingway. It will actually highlight passive voice for me, so I don't have to look at it too carefully and scrutinize it. I can see it right there pop out at me. One point I didn't mention from the last slide is you always want to have someone else other than yourself review your writing. You'll become blind to any errors and mistakes you have in it. We just do. We don't notice things. We see them so often we think that everyone will understand it, everyone will know where we're coming from, and then you have someone read it who hasn't, and they look at you and go, I don't get what this meant. So that's something you want to have. You want to have proofreaders, and this is something you never grow out of. I have people look over my writing. It doesn't matter what level you're at. People should look over your writing and give you comments. Returning back to active versus passive voice, these are things like we wrote the paper over several months instead of the paper was written over several months. The first sentence there is much quicker to read through. You can actually study that and test it. People will read it quicker and understand it quicker, and it's more direct. This also brings up a problem. One of the reasons I think people slip into passive voice quite a bit is because they've been told never to use first person singular or first person plural in their writing. So we, I, that is something that is mostly limited to literary writing. In APA style, there's no prohibition against first-person writing. In fact, if it's a sole author piece and you want to say, I believe that, or I did this research, or, if it's multiple authors, you say we conducted a two-way ANOVA or whatever, you're talking about, that's fine. There's no reason you have to go into third person. Now, you can use third person if you've been kind of, as I put there, beaten into your skull over many years never to use it. But you don't have to. You could use the first person. APA, you also, though, want to keep professional tone, obviously. So you don't just start saying, me and my friends, we did this. That's not going to work too well. The APA manual, as I put there, has an entire section on mechanics. So spacing, punctuation, brackets, slashes, spellings, capitalization, italics, abbreviations, statistical formatting, all of that stuff. I'm not going to go through all of that right now because honestly, a lot of those cases are kind of niche cases where this might be a problem, it might not be a problem. So you'll want to refer to the manual as you're writing to make sure that you're looking for those things. So what does an example paper look like? Well, I told you that there's one in that zip package you can download off my website. But the easiest thing to do when you're writing, and oddly the thing that some students resist the most, is to look at example papers written in APA style and make yours look like theirs. If you didn't catch that, I said look at example papers and make yours look like theirs. What that means is you need to make yours look like theirs, and if you're still unsure, please make yours look like theirs. Example manuscripts like the one here, this is the cover page of the one I've been talking about. Honestly, this is where students lose so many points. It breaks my heart when I see students turn in papers that they just didn't follow any of this. The title page is missing, or the title page, the text comes right after the title, or the abstract is gone, or the introduction starts with the word introduction and not with the title. Just look at what they did and make it look like theirs. As I put this example paper from the Society for the Teaching of Psychology, Jordan Buss and Richard Froman is in the zip file that I have there. on my website, you'll want to grab that and take a look at it. It's a very nice thing, and it's all marked up with examples of how APA style looks and works. And there's an example paper in the APA manual as well. Let's talk about citation. Plagiarism. It's a pretty dirty word, and it's a word that you do not want leveled at you in any way, shape, or form. Plagiarism is simply taking or appearing to take the contents of another person's work or ideas and passing it off as your own. Seems like this isn't something you should be able to do accidentally, but that's actually where I see most of the plagiarism that I catch in my students' papers. You know, you look at something and you go, well, I'll just paraphrase that, and you end up basically writing exactly the same thing that the other person did. Paraphrasing is a fine art. There is not kind of an easy way around it, and definitely, if you think that just changing a word to a synonym of that word makes it plagiar or makes it paraphrased, you are dead wrong, and you will get caught. So one of the things I would encourage you to do is take a look at the plagiarism tutorial by Dr. Bramsfeld. I've also put that in the zip file that I put on my website, although you can download it from STP's website as well. It is very comprehensive. It's about 80 slides. It has examples. It has a lot of information in it that you'll want to look at. So if you think of this as kind of your homework after this tutorial, it definitely is. Go through that plagiarism tutorial and see what Dr. Bramsfeld has to say about things. And I think you'll get a much more nuanced understanding of plagiarism after that. Now, assuming you know that you have to reference something, APA-style references in the reference section all follow a same guideline. It's a pretty simple one. We start with the author, last name, and initials. The first name of authors never appears in an APA-style manuscript. It doesn't appear in the text. It does not appear in the reference page. It's always initials. Then we have the year of publication. We have the book title, the place of publication, and the publisher. I like this graphic from the Fitchburg State University Library quite nicely. They do this very nice sort of breaking down of these. If it's with an editor or editors get some credit, but they are not the original author, so you'll see sometimes that's listed such as that. If it's an individual piece, you'll see a kind of a hybrid that's both of these put together, so the author name of the piece and then where it appeared in this edited volume. If it's from an online database, you can find something like this. It looks very similar to the journal citation or book citation. It does include what's called a DOI number. DOI numbers are relatively new. They're about 10, 15 years old now. They are part of APA style, but not everything you're citing may have a DOI. So if you can't find a DOI, I wouldn't stress yourself out over it. But if you have it, it should go at the end of your references. It makes things much easier to basically search online. I can type in that DOI into Google or Google Scholar or EBSCOhost or any of the other databases out there and grab that information. And the article from a print journal looks pretty similar to an article from an online database. When you're writing and using citations, this is what's called a parenthetical citation, or citations inside of parentheses. Not only must you include the references at the end of the paper, you actually have to tell me where in the paper you're using them. So this is a common problem as well, that students will go, well, can't I just throw it all in a reference section? No, because then I don't know who said what, or who thought about what, or if it's your idea or someone else's idea. I put some examples down here. I wrote a paper in 2010 with a couple of colleagues, and this was actually a takeaway point from that, so I kind of know how to write this stuff. That's why they're all focusing on mixed handers and strong handers. So you can say things like, according to Westphal, Jasper, and Zelmanova, parentheses 2010, and parentheses, mixed handers discount more so than strong handers. You've cited it properly. It's right there. I know what the information, where it came from, and how to find it. Or mixed handers discount more so than strong handers. Westphal, Jasper, and Zelmanova, 2010. The second time you go through, if you have 3 to 5 authors, you can actually use an abbreviation at all. So I could have, if that was the second time through, that last sentence could have read, mixed standards discount more so than strong-handers. Westphal et al., comma, 2010. And if it's 6 or more authors, then you can actually use et al. The first time through. So it makes it easier, especially if you're citing things in the medical field where there might be 15, 20 authors on a paper. You probably don't want to put all of them in the parenthetical citation. You could take up half of the page of the manuscript with one citation. So that is, those are acceptable ways. Here's some things I see that are not acceptable. In an article written in 2010, Jonathan Westphal, John D. Jasper, and Julie Zelmanova wrote that mixed standards discount more so than strong-handers. A lot of things wrong with that. First, I told you first names don't appear, so I would get rid of those. Second, it's really wordy. For all you have to do is basically say mixed standards discount more so than strong-handers, parentheses, Westphal, Jasper, and Zelmanova, comma, 2010. For some reason, students really like writing in this style sometimes, and I think it does go back to that little bit of how do I make this sound more important, or how do I talk about it in terms of what I actually did. I actually found this article and it was written by these people, but it's not clear and concise, and it needs to be edited out. Westphal said in 2010 that mixed standards discount more so than strong-handers. Unless you're actually quoting exactly what Westphal said, you want to just make that into mixed standards discount more so than strong-handers, parentheses, Westphal, comma, 2010. Otherwise, I've seen students get into this construction where their entire literature review sounds like Westphal said this, Smith said that, Jones said this, Bob said that, whatever. And it just gets really boring to read and really annoying. So don't fall into that. Now, occasionally can you say things like, Westphal and colleagues found blah, blah, blah. Yeah, every so often that's fine to throw that in, and then you put Westphal and colleagues, parentheses, 2010, found, etc. But you don't want to write like you speak. And when I speak, I might say things like so-and-so said this, I said that, they said this. When you're writing, you have the ability to go back and edit, so take care of that ability and do so. Mixed standards discount more so than strong-handers, parentheses, Jonathan Westphal. There's no year. You always have to have the year. The year is what tells me in science how recent this information is. If the year isn't there, I don't know if Westphal wrote that in 2010 or 1910. It was 2010. 1910 would be ridiculous, but still, point given. You need to have the year in there. And when using a direct quote, that is the one time you put a page number in. Other than that, you never put page numbers in APA style. This is a problem I see with people who are used to MLA and they're used to page numbers. Unless you're putting a direct quote in, no page numbers. And if you're putting a quote in that has more than 40 words, give or take, I don't think no editor will probably count the words. But if it's a block of text, it becomes a block quote, which means you don't have to put quotation marks around it. You indent it in the page, and you have something like I took from the APA manual below there. You give the page number, you give the citation, but we know that starting at co-presence and ending at assembly, that is a quotation from Purcell, 1997, and it was found on pages 111 to 112. So that's what I can say about citations and references. Let's talk a little bit about tables and figures. Okay, that table that's on that slide, that's what happens if you go into Microsoft Word and you say, I want a table, Word. Why don't you give me one? Word says, okay, how many columns and how many lines do you want? And you say, well, I'd like to have 5 columns. I like to have 3 lines. And then you start typing in it. And it looks like that. In addition to that being really silly and fanciful, APA style tables look nothing like that. Ever. They look something like this. This is actually a copy. It's actually my reproduction of Figure 5 or Table 5.5 from the APA Style Manual. You can find the Word document that has that in there in that zip file I keep talking about, in case you want to see how I've set it up in Word. But you'll notice that there are only lines around the top and bottom of the headings and at the top and bottom of the table. There's indenting so that I can see easily where certain things start and stop. I do not have grid all the way around. I do not have grid around every cell. If you turn in something like what I put on that last slide, you will have someone who gets very frustrated that you could not copy a table style. Figures. So APA figures are technically anything that is not a table. They should stand on their own, just like tables kind of can. I mean, I should be able to show someone a figure and they should be able to tell what I'm talking about with it. The figure I have there is, ironically, figure 5.5 from the APA manual, done in Excel. So the last one was table 5.5. This is figure 5.5. And you'll notice that it does a good use of, makes good use of its space. Excel does not make good use of space by itself. Excel will put that legend on the right-hand side and take up a whole bunch of space on the right-hand side just for that legend. Excel will put a title on it. You don't want a title on it. You want to have a figure caption below it in APA style. And really, if you don't need a figure, you shouldn't have a figure. Figures serve to help make sense of the world, not make it more complicated, more annoying. So that is the basics of APA style. I want to finish up by talking about some of the biggest problems that I see as a professor who grades papers written in APA style and an editor that serves on the editorial board of the Journal of Behavioral Decision Making and other journals as well, as an ad hoc reviewer of many manuscripts. This first one. Oh my God, I'm running so late on this. My professor won't mind if I just ignore all that APA style crap. Who cares if my paper doesn't look like the example? That's from a student about to get an F. Why do I care as a professor? I care because A, I'm sending you out into the world with the degree that says you know how to do this stuff, and so you better know how to do this stuff. B, you need to be able to write in a way that other people can easily access it. And APA style, even though it's annoying, does allow that. And so this is why professors and editors are sticklers for APA style, because it's not negotiable. You can't expect everyone in the world to give you the same kind of consideration as your favorite professor, and I don't do you any service by going, yeah, I know they should have put that in style, but I kind of like this student. I don't want to cause them any problems. Number 2, I'll just copy and paste this from Wikipedia. My professor will never know. Student about to get kicked out of Delta State. Your professor will know. You don't sound like Wikipedia. I hate to level with you, but you don't. You are probably not going to write on the same quality of an encyclopedia article. Even though Wikipedia is completely written by individuals that are not necessarily editors, they are educated individuals. They write in a different style than most students write. So you will be found, if not by your professor, but by a service like Turnitin. The professors run your paper through, and you will be charged with plagiarism. And there can be some very serious things about that. At the very best, you might just get a 0 on the assignment. At the very worst, you could get kicked out of school. So don't play around with that. Your professor will find out. Someone will find out. The guilt will eat you alive. Maybe not, but you will be found out. Changing displayed to shows is paraphrasing. Yeah, well, the original text said that it was displayed for 5 minutes, and I changed it to it was shown for 5 minutes. Yeah, that's paraphrasing, right? No. Just dropping one word out, changing a word here and there, that's not paraphrasing. It's the same kind of problem as copying and pasting. It's not even looked at as less severe. It's looked at the same level. So if you're going to try that, don't even try it, because it doesn't help you at all. If anything, it shows your professor that you knew exactly what you were doing by just changing a couple of words. And lastly, I can wing it without the APA manual. Dr. Westfall's presentation was good enough. While I would be so honored that that was what you said and that is what you believed, it's not true. You need an APA manual. Hopefully you've learned something from this presentation. Hopefully you've taken some things away from it. And if you have any questions as you're looking through my references or my sources or anything else, please feel free to contact me. You can find my email address is just Jon at johnwestfall.com. You'll be able to get a hold of me if you have questions. But really, you want to do your due diligence on this. I know APA style isn't easy. I know APA style can be downright painful. But I believe that you can get through it, and I believe that you can be very successful in writing in APA style. That's all I have. Thanks for your time.